Dominic Ryan's retirement from the game as a result of concussions. Like, these stories are never going to go away. There will always be players who end up, unfortunately, because of the contact nature of the game. And at least World Rugby has made proper, genuine attempts to change the tackle area in recent years. So it appears as if an awakening of sorts has happened in the game. I don't know what your feeling is in this when you see this happening still. What do you think of it?
Well, listen, you never like seeing a player that, particularly that you've played with, having to retire, and reading a pretty harrowing article about it. And I suppose, first of all, it's a relief that he's not suffering from the symptoms anymore, and that he has the rest of his life, and he's been smart enough to not try and play on through, pain, or ignore issues that clearly are far bigger than any game that you can play. He's Dominic, or Dippy as the lads know him, is an incredibly popular guy. He was a guy on your Christmas party that you wanted to find yourself in his group, or in the dressing room sitting next to him. You were going to have a good laugh. He is a brilliant addition to any side, and I knew that he'd be a great addition to Leicester as a player, but also as a personality. But reading about that, about his issues, it's pretty sobering that it's still happening. There's still the odd one slipping through the cracks. And yes, we've come so far in the last 3-4 years, particularly, I suppose, since I've retired, maybe 5-6 years, the last couple of years of my playing days. But it just shows that we have to be so aware and continue to try and make sure that there's no more of these types of cases. I see that they're now they've eared up the doctors in the Pro 14, and there's an independent doctor there too. I think that's another stage where he can pass information in to the relevant doctors and say, player 13 or player 12 is taking a knock, have a look.
Yeah.
So I think that's another step forward, and I think that's really important, that we have to continue to protect our players, and as a result protect our game.
Yeah, because if it doesn't, then the game dies, and there's no point in dressing it up any other way. Like, the lawyers will take over in 4 or 5 years and go, you didn't show the duty of care that you needed to, this is the money that we need for you, it's in the billions, okay, thanks very much. This game's it becomes touch rugby at that point. So it's much better that they're out in front of it. In terms of the long-term repercussions from the game, do you have any headaches still, or any of that kind of stuff?
I never got any headaches. And the amount of diagnosed concussions versus how many I had, I would say there's a big variancy there.
Yeah.
Because we talked about this before, because it was probably seen as heroic to be stumbling and getting back on when you felt, or getting back up when you felt unwell, or you had dizziness or whatever. That mentality has changed, thankfully, and players are a bit smarter. But at the same time, you have to remember that most players' attitude is to never leave the pitch. So that's why the decision always has to be taken out of the individual's hands. When I got brought off HIA'd against the All Blacks in that game that we lost in the last second with about 25 minutes to go, the doctor, Eir Sport, he'd been accused of missing one in the French game the previous year, so he wasn't going to let that happen again. But I knew when he HIA'd me that I wasn't coming back. It was one of those really frustrating walks, because I just knew that he wasn't going to let me back on, irrespective of what happened in my HIA. And I did pass it, and he's like, no, I saw him spitting his gum shield out, or he just saw something that he didn't like the look of.
You're not roaring at him like, well, hang on, what's the purpose of the HIA? I've passed the bloody thing.
But what can you do? I felt I got a serious shock in that, like a jolt in that game. Was it concussion based against what concussions I had over the course of my career? No, it wasn't. But based on the new levels or criteria for what concussions are, is it now? Probably.
Yeah.
Or certainly close to it. And he wasn't taking any risks. It was a painful 25 minutes watching from the sidelines, but I'm almost, if I was, I probably didn't feel the same disappointment as everyone else after the game, because my head wasn't feeling perfectly right. So he's probably right. I probably did have a concussion.
Yeah.
The pain didn't seem as terrible as it did for the last 4.5 years since that next day.
There was footage from the after match do in the barrels of Lansdowne Road. I don't know if you ever saw this, but it was a sponsor thing. It was 3 at the time, and you, Rog, and Des Cal. Was Rog in the team that day? No,
no, he wasn't. No, Rog was with RT at the time.
Okay, so maybe he'd come down to do the gig afterwards, and you are looking so pissed off, like, but not chatting in the whole thing. And it looked like you were somebody who had actually come out of the game because of injury. I don't know if you have any recollection of that period, but I remember looking at that going. The footage was taken down really quickly afterwards. I was like, that guy looking cuss. And what's the story with this? But yeah, I don't know. Do you regret not going back on in that game now?
Yeah, of
knowing
course.
Everything, really, even knowing all the things you know.
It wasn't your call, though.
No, it wasn't my call. If it was my call, would I have gone back on? Absolutely.
And today?
Yeah.
Would you? Yeah.
Would I today?
If all we know about second impact syndrome, even
No, today I'm glad. It's a really hard question to answer because I never got to. Do you feel as though you could have been the difference in a game like that? Yeah, of course you do. We're delusional as players, but knowing what second impact, what's come to light on that, am I glad that I didn't? Ultimately, yes, but it's a very difficult yes to give you because
it's not really.
What worried me,
it's a very hard one.
Because
what's more important than beating the All Blacks is living a normal life, and but that's extreme. That's extremes where that double impact happens. You kind of always think glass half full, where I go back on and I don't get another impact, and I'm able to get Ryan Crotty in the corner, and everything's fine.
You're so desperately unlucky. But like the no matter how vigilant we are, the Dominic Ryan situation shows how an injury can mask concussion. So you're actually been treated for the wrong. They're treating you for the injury during the week after the game, but no one's looking at the concussion.
The flip
and he came on the following week.
The flip has happened to me as well. When I got hit by Scott Williams in the last year or two, it was the biggest shot that I've ever been hit by, and he actually broke his collarbone and hit me square in the sternum. And Arthur Tanner was the doctor who passed away a couple of years ago. He came out and I couldn't speak, and he was like, "Hey, I need." Got straight on the mic saying, "I need a HIA," and I couldn't actually get it out that I'm grand. I literally just got a shot in the sternum. No, I was fine. Literally, it was square on, and he was insisting on that. And once the breath came back, I really had to be forceful in saying, "I am not. Have a look at the footage. I am fine." So. You can see from a player's perspective, the last thing you want to do is go off the pitch for a HIA when there is no issue. There's been no head collision. That is beyond frustrating, because you as a player, you want to be out there. You've got to be helping your teammates out. If you're on the pitch, off the pitch, you don't have a say in what's happening.
And the other thing on the Ryan is, no matter how much we change the tackle area, we want to bring it as low. If you're forcing people to tackle around the knees, you still get your head in the wrong position, you're going to get yourself hurt. And he acknowledged that he didn't really care for his own body going into that tackle on George North. He got his head in front of the hip rather than behind it, as you're taught as a child from 4 years old onwards. And no matter what they do to the rules, like, that will never be eradicated.
You're always going to have concussions in the game. We're not going to extricate them from our game completely. That's not what's going to happen. It's about limiting them, identifying them, and putting the processes in place that we are able to control what happens when it does happen.
Yeah.
Thanks a million for watching. If you want to subscribe, well, there's the button right there. If you want to see more videos, hit that down there.